Bullets screamed through the air, mud, blood, smoke so thick you couldn't see 3 feet in front of you, and somewhere in the middle of all that hell, a rabbit, not running away, running toward the fire. That rabbit carried something no soldier could. And what happened next, nobody who was there ever forgot it. Stay with me, because this story gets darker before it gets incredible. The year was 1917. The Western Front, one of the most brutal, soul-destroying stretches of land in human history. Hundreds of kilometers of trenches dug into French and Belgian soil, soaked in rain, soaked in blood. Men lived underground like animals, eating canned rations, sleeping in mud, listening to artillery shake the earth above them every single night. You have to understand what these trenches actually look like, not like the movies. Worse, much worse. The walls were made of rotting sandbags and wooden planks slick with moisture. Rats, massive ones, ran over sleeping men's faces at night. Disease spread faster than orders. The smell of death was so constant that soldiers stopped noticing it after the first week. Communication between trenches was one of the biggest tactical nightmares of the entire war. Telephone wires got cut by shrapnel within hours of being laid. Runners, human messengers, got killed crossing open ground before they made it 50 meters. Carrier pigeons, the best tool available, got shot by enemy snipers who knew exactly what they were carrying. So messages didn't get through, orders got lost, men died waiting for information that never came. And into this world, this nightmare of mud and metal, walked a rabbit named Jack. Private Thomas Ellery found Jack in the autumn of 1916, 3 weeks after arriving at the front. He was barely 19 years old, from a small farm in Yorkshire, and he had never fired a rifle at another human being until the week before he found the rabbit. Jack was tiny, white with gray patches, could fit in the palm of one hand. Thomas found him shivering beneath a collapsed section of trench wall, half buried in dirt, eyes wide open with pure terror. "You and me both, mate," Thomas whispered, pulling the rabbit out gently and tucking him inside his coat. His sergeant, a hard man named Fletcher, who had been on the front for 18 months and had the hollow eyes to prove it, told him to let it go. "We don't have food for ourselves, Ellery. We're not feeding a rabbit." "He'll find his own food, Sergeant. He'll earn his keep." Fletcher stared at him for a long moment. How exactly does a rabbit earn its keep in a trench? Thomas didn't have an answer. Not yet. But Jack adapted faster than any human could. Within days, he had mapped the entire network of their section of trench, every turn, every dugout, every connecting tunnel. He moved like water through narrow spaces. He knew where the food was stored, where the warmest spots were at night, which men were kind, and which ones would kick at him. And he was fast. Extraordinarily fast. The soldiers started noticing something else too. Something that made the older, more experienced men sit up and pay attention. Jack was sensitive to incoming artillery in a way no human could match. His ears, those long, mobile, incredibly precise ears, could detect the subsonic vibration of a shell several seconds before any human could hear or feel it. He would freeze, flatten himself completely against the trench floor, his entire body rigid, and then 5 to 8 seconds later, boom. Private Kowalski, a Polish-born soldier who had been on the front for 2 years, was the first one to really pay attention to this pattern. He watched Jack for 3 straight days, counted the reactions, timed the gaps. "That rabbit is a warning system," he told Thomas one evening, voice low, completely serious. "He's just scared," Thomas said. "We're all scared, but he's scared earlier than us." They started watching Jack together. When Jack went flat, they went flat. 6 times in 4 days, Jack's reaction saved men from catching shrapnel that would have cut through the trench at chest height. The soldiers started positioning themselves near Jack during quiet periods, watching him the way medieval sailors watch storm birds. Word spread quietly, the way things do in close quarters military life. Don't make noise about it. Don't let command think you're superstitious. But when Jack freezes, you move. War animal, if you haven't subscribed yet, the story gets much stranger from here. Then came November 12th, 1916. The British command had been planning a push on a German position about 400 meters to the northeast. It required a coordinated attack, 2 companies moving simultaneously from different angles. The timing had to be perfect. If Company B moved too early without Company A in position, they'd be crossing open ground alone under German machine gun fire. The communication plan relied on a telephone line that had been laid 2 days before. Backup option, a runner. At 4:47 inches the morning, the telephone line went dead. Sergeant Fletcher grabbed the first available runner, Private Dawson, 22 years old, fast as anyone in the regiment, and sent him with a message. Dawson tied his laces tight, took a breath, and went over the top. He made it 40 meters. The sound of the shot reached them a second later. Fletcher stood at the edge of the trench, looking out into darkness and early morning fog, jaw tight. Company A was waiting. Company B was going to move in 11 minutes regardless. Without the message reaching Company A, men were going to walk into a killing ground from the wrong angle. "We need another runner," Fletcher said. Nobody moved. Not cowardice calculation. They had watched Dawson go down. Whoever went next was going into the same open ground with the same German sniper waiting. And then Thomas Ellery said something that made every man in that trench go quiet. "Let me send Jack." The silence that followed that sentence was total. "What?" Fletcher's voice was dangerously flat. "He's low to the ground, fast. In this fog, they won't see him. He knows the trench network. I've watched him learn it, Sergeant. He knows the smell of the men here. If I can get him to Company A's position once before the attack, he'll remember it." Ellery, that is the single most insane thing anyone has ever said to me in 18 months of this war. "Do you have another runner willing to go?" Another silence, longer this time. "How would he carry a message?" Kowalski asked, quietly, carefully, not laughing. Thomas pulled out a small metal cylinder, the kind normally used for carrier pigeon messages, attach it to his leg, light enough that he won't notice it. Fletcher looked at his watch. 9 minutes. "If that rabbit gets killed in no man's land and you've lost us, the only edge we have for warning, I know, Sergeant. And if this is some stupid boy's sentimentality about a pet, it's not, Sergeant. Watch him." Fletcher watched Jack. At that exact moment, Jack's ears rotated once, twice. His body went rigid. 7 seconds later, a German mortar shell hit 40 meters to their right. Fletcher looked at the rabbit, then at Ellery, then back at his watch. 8 minutes. "Do it." Thomas worked fast, hands shaking slightly in the cold. He attached the tiny cylinder to Jack's rear leg with a thin cord not tight enough to restrict movement, just enough to hold. He crouched down and held Jack against his chest for a moment, face close to the rabbit's soft ear. "You've mapped this place better than any of us," he whispered. "You know where they are. You've smelled them. Go find them." He set Jack down at the mouth of the trench. Jack sat still for 1 second, ears up, nose working. Then he bolted. Not over the top. Thomas had been wrong about that. Jack ran along the trench floor, moving at a speed that made 2 soldiers stumble backward, trying to get out of his way. A white-gray blur shooting through the narrow channel, around the first bend, through the connecting tunnel into the secondary trench network. "Gone. Now we wait," Thomas said. His voice was completely steady. His hands were not. 5 minutes passed. Then 6. The clock for Company B's advance was ticking. If Jack didn't reach Company A in time with the message, or if the message didn't hold the advance, 7 minutes. "Ellery," Fletcher said. Just the name. A warning and a question at the same time. "Give him time, Sergeant." 8 minutes. And then a voice from the communications horn connected to Company A's position. A voice that was confused, slightly breathless, and completely unprepared for what it was about to say. "This is Corporal Hayes at Company A. We've had a rabbit arrive at our position. Small white one with a gray patch. Has a message cylinder on its leg. Is this intentional?" Thomas Ellery closed his eyes. "Yes," Fletcher said into the horn. And for the first time in months, there was something in his voice that wasn't exhaustion or iron control. "Read the message, Corporal, and hold your advance." They held. The timing was corrected. The attack went forward 12 minutes later from both angles simultaneously, exactly as planned. The German position was taken. 43 British soldiers who would have walked into a crossfire didn't. Nobody filed an official report about how the message was delivered. Nobody wrote it in the war diary. It was the kind of thing that, if you wrote it down officially, would make you look like you'd lost your mind. But every man who was there knew. Jack came back to Thomas's position by mid-morning, trotted back through the trench network like he was returning from a casual morning run, sat down next to Thomas's boots and cleaned his face with both front paws. Thomas sat down next to him in the mud and didn't say anything for a long time. Kowalski, watching from 3 meters away, finally spoke. "You know what that rabbit just did? He did what no runner could do. No telephone, no pigeon, just memory and speed, and the fact that nobody had thought to aim at a rabbit. But here's the part that nobody expected. Here's the thing that makes this story different from every other war animal story you've heard. Jack kept doing it, not because anyone trained him, not because there was a system, because Jack had decided, in whatever way a rabbit decides things, that this trench was his territory and these men were his. And he moved through that territory the way he'd always moved, with complete knowledge of it, total confidence in it, and a speed that nothing human could match in those cramped underground corridors. Over the next 4 months, Jack carried messages 11 more times. Not always in combat situations, and sometimes just time-sensitive information between positions. When the telephone was down and sending a human meant delay, the soldiers developed a loose, unofficial system, the message cylinder, the specific trench corridor, and trust, the absolute unscientific, completely unmilitary trust that Jack knew where to go. He was never caught, never shot, never lost. War Animal, this channel exists to tell you the stories they didn't write in the history books. If this one hit different, you already know what to do. There is one more moment, the one Thomas Ellery wrote about decades later in a letter to his granddaughter, which is how this story survived. March 1917, a German advance pushed through a section of trench held by a skeleton crew. Most of the company had been pulled to another position. 6 men, including Thomas and Kowalski, were cut off. No communication, no way to call for support without exposing their position. German soldiers working their way methodically through the connecting tunnels. Thomas had one message to send, one chance to tell command where they were and what was happening. One runner would have to cross 60 meters of open trench under fire to reach the nearest communication point. He looked at Jack. Jack was already flat against the trench floor, body rigid, every muscle locked. Incoming. Thomas pressed himself against the wall. The shell hit 8 seconds later, close enough that the blast knocked dirt down into his collar and rang his ears like church bells. When the ringing faded, he looked down. Jack was already moving, already running, already gone. Thomas hadn't attached a message yet. He hadn't needed to. What he didn't know, what he only found out 2 hours later when support arrived, was that Jack had gone directly to the command position. No message cylinder, nothing attached, just a white rabbit appearing alone without Thomas in a place he had never been sent alone before. The officer there, a Major Collins, who had heard the stories but never witnessed them, looked at the rabbit, looked at the direction it had come from, and made a decision that he later said he could not rationally explain. He sent support to Thomas's position. They arrived in time. Jack survived the war. Thomas brought him home to Yorkshire in 1918. Jack lived another 4 years on the farm, moving through the property with the same quiet confidence he'd moved through the trenches, mapping it, learning it, owning it. Thomas never talked about the war much, but he talked about Jack, told the story to anyone who asked why there was a framed photograph of a rabbit on the wall of his sitting room. A small white rabbit with a gray patch, sitting in a trench, surrounded by soldiers, looking directly at the camera with those wide, calm eyes. Not scared, not confused, just present, watching, listening to things none of the humans around him could hear. 43 men walked out of that November morning because a rabbit remembered a smell and ran toward it instead of away. There's something in that. Something about what it means to know your place, to know your people, and to run toward the thing everyone else is running from. Jack didn't know he was a hero. He was just doing what he'd always done, moving through the world with complete attention, mapping everything, trusting nothing but his own senses. And somehow, in the worst place humans had ever made for themselves, that was exactly enough.